The Wolfman, released in 2010 and directed by Joe Johnston with a script by Andrew Kevin Walker, the man who gave us Seven, 8mm and Sleepy Hollow. The Wolfman stars Benicio del Toro as Lawrence Talbot, a Shakespearean actor who is notified by his sister-in-law that his brother is missing. Returning to his father's estate, he reunites with his estranged father, played by Anthony Hopkins, who is told that his brother's mauled and mutilated body has been found. Lawrence sets out to find his brother's killer, only to discover a dark family secret. The special effects are on Oscar-winning form here by Rick Baker and his team. Rick Baker, the man who created American Werewolf in London, and Benicio del Toro spent more than 4 hours a day in the makeup chair. Fun fact, del Toro doesn't appear as the wolf until 3 short notes on a violin is played. The Howling. Released in 1981 and directed by Joe Dante, the man who would go on to give us Gremlins, Looney Tunes Back in Action, and Small Soldiers, brings us one of the 4 werewolf movies that were released in 1981. The movie stars Dee Wallace as Karen White, a reporter who is being stalked by Eddie Quist, a serial killer who is only talking to Karen. He waits for her at the peep show. After a near-fatal incident with Eddie is killed, causing her to suffer amnesia and a series of violent nightmares, Karen's therapist advises her to go to the colony, where she can have a nice relaxing weekend break. The residents at the colony are all a bit creepy to her, and as Karen is faced with an unexpected terror. The makeup effects are created by Rob Bottin, the man who would go on to create the effects and give us such classics as RoboCop, Total Recall, and The Thing. Rob Bottin's most celebrated effect was the on-screen transformation of Eddie Quist, which involved air bladders under latex facial applications to give the illusion of transformation. Fun fact, James Mackerel, who plays the reporter Lou Landers in this movie, he also shows up in Gremlins as the exact same character, so this shows us that The Howling and Gremlins are a shared universe. An American Werewolf in London. Released the same year as The Howling, written and directed by John Landis, the man who gave us such comedy classics as The Blues Brothers, Trading Places, Coming to America, and many more. This horror classic was deemed too frightening to be a comedy and too funny to be a horror movie. We start the movie in Yorkshire, miles away from London at the title, where we meet David and Jack, 2 United States students who are on a walking tour of the United Kingdom. They stumble across a pub called the Slaughtered Lamb. The boys notice a symbol on the wall which makes the pub locals hostile towards them. They tell them to get out. They leave to not have any trouble. This is when we first get to the first part of any wolf action of the film. Jack is torn to shreds and David is injured. The wolf is killed by the locals. Before David can pass out, he sees that the creature is now a man. Three weeks pass as we see David is now in a London hospital being questioned by the police. He tells them some kind of creature attacked him and he was not an escaped convict. From here on now is when we start to see the Oscar-winning makeup effects for the film. David is visited by Jack, his deceased friend, with all his wounds open. He tells David that it was a werewolf who attacked him and that David is now one and he will turn into one at the next full moon. David is released and lives with the nurse who helped him in the hospital, played by Jenny Agutter. Jack, now more decayed than ever before, tells David he will be turning tomorrow night. David transforms into the werewolf. The makeup effects were created by Rick Baker and were groundbreaking for the time. Hydraulic pumps were used for the extending parts of the body, his hands and his feet, while hair was pulled through and the effects body was filmed in reverse, so the hair looked like it was growing at a much faster rate. For the special effects in this film, they were the first ever film to be nominated and win the Oscar for Best Makeup Effects. Fun fact: all the songs used in this movie have the word moon in their title. Wolf. Released in 1994 and directed by Mike Nichols, Jack Nicholson stars as Will Randall, an aging publisher when a younger co-worker snaps up a job for under him. Will, after being bitten by a wolf, starts to notice changes in himself. Energy levels spiking, more competitive nature than he has ever been, and truly heightened senses. Will's boss, Raymond Alden, played by the always brilliant Christopher Plummer, has an estranged daughter, Laura, played here by Michelle Pfeiffer, who starts to fall in love with Will. After being examined by a doctor, he is given an amulet that will prevent him from changing. However, the doctor says he will only give Will the amulet if he is bitten by him. Will refuses, but the doctor still hands over the amulet as a gift. Will fires his younger co-worker, Stuart, played by James Spader, and during the confrontation in the bathroom after peeing on his shoes, Will bites him. This turns the last 20 minutes into a back and forth fight at a bar between Will and Stuart, which ends up with Michelle Pfeiffer's character Laura shooting Stuart to death. The makeup effects were again created by Rick Baker and his team. During production, Jack Nicholson told Baker that he was allergic to spirit gum. A few weeks later, Rick Baker forgot this and used it on Jack. The next day, Jack came in, his face was covered in red swells. Jack looked at Rick and said, "Ricky, my boy, you used spirit gum, didn't you?" Fun fact: one of the cops who attempts to arrest Will at the zoo is played by David Schwimmer, who is just a few months away from becoming a star with the impending debut of Friends. Dog Soldiers. Released in 2002 and is the debut of writer-director Neil Marshall. We start the story in the Scottish Highlands, where we see a couple who are gone camping. Shortly afterwards, they are killed in their tent by unseen assailants. Meanwhile, this is when we meet a soldier named Cooper who is on the run through a forest. We find out that he's actually trying to join the Special Forces unit, the SAS, but fails when he refuses to shoot a dog in cold blood. He is returned to his unit by Captain Ryan. A couple of weeks later, a squad of 6 British soldiers, including Cooper, are dropped into the Scottish Highlands to carry out a training exercise against the SAS unit. The following morning, they find the SAS unit's savaged remains. A badly wounded Captain Ryan, the only survivor, makes cryptic references to what attacked them. The troops retreat when unseen assailants begin pursuing them. They make their way to a dirt road, and this is where we see Megan for the first time, driving by as she heard the gunshots. They all jump into her car and they make it to a house just down the road. The soldiers who are remaining are Wells, Cooper, Spoon, Joe and Terry. As darkness falls, the house is surrounded by the attackers, where we now see that they are werewolves. They barricade up the house, patch the wounded, and make a plan to survive the night. After scouring the house for weapons and a small battle with the wolves, they find that Captain Ryan, who was gravely injured when they found him, his wounds all healed, and they find out that now Ryan is one of the werewolves. Megan, who is the zoologist who has been helping them, is also a werewolf, and the house that they are in belongs to the wolves outside. Dog Soldiers' makeup effects were actually created by Image FX. The wolves were portrayed by ballet dancers instead of stuntmen. This was to give the illusion of a more graceful walk on screen. We were also supposed to have a sequel called Dog Soldiers 2: Fresh Meat. This was meant to come out in 2006, but up until this day, we still do not have any information if or when this will be happening. Fun fact: Jason Statham was actually asked to be in this film and star as Cooper, but he had to turn it down as he was just starting to film John Carpenter's Ghost of Mars. Thank you to each and every one of you who has watched and enjoyed this top 5 werewolf movies, in my opinion. Please like and subscribe, share, and we'll see you in the next top 5.